Hi, I'm Marnie Ogg, the CEO and founder of the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance, and it's a privilege to present to you today Light at Night, the Dark Truth. The astronauts on the International Space Station who see this picture of Australia at night orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. That's 15 sunrises and sunsets each day and one hell of a complicated night's sleep. Since the first crewed spaceflight in 1969, there's been 135 missions, with each flight crew remarking on the lights that they see below them growing. These pretty little lights, which do look like little fairy lights, define geographical borders. They demonstrate wealth and world population and are being used by researchers to study the aspects of people movement, hunting, and even fishing. Used for street lighting, advertising, security, safety, and beautification of spaces, light makes our world brighter. It feels safer and supports a 24/7 economy. They are also contributing to the world's fastest growing pollutant, light. And most people haven't even thought about it. Those that have include astronomers, ecologists, chronobiologists, and a growing body of mum and dad conservationists. These people are watching light pollution grow, and this image, which I'm often told when I give talks is stunning, is about as pretty as my next image to this group of nighttime preservationists. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. For years now, we've watched plastic concentrating together on the ocean's surface, reaching the depths of the Mariana Trench and seeping into our food chain. This takes hundreds of years to break down. But how can light be a pollutant? It's innocuous, right? It doesn't burn or smell. It doesn't make us cough. Unlike plastic, which leaves a scar on the environment, light is impacting our environment on the most basic level of all. Cellular. And rather than me going on and on and on about this, I'd like to introduce you to two of my board members of the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance who will go through this in more detail. First of all, you'll hear from Landon Bannister, the Director of Southern Lighting and Distribution, and then from Dr. Teresa Jones from the Urban Light Lab at the University of Melbourne.
Thank you, Marnie. This is an image of Brooklyn Bridge, New York, as we would say it tonight if we were to stand out there on those banks of Brooklyn. And this is an image of what Brooklyn Bridge would look like if there was a blackout in New York. And the point of showing you that image is just to remind us that the stars haven't actually gone anywhere. It's just that we have chosen to block them from our view and to remove them from our night. And so I guess the question is, who made that choice? Why do we decide to remove the stars from our night sky? And New York was picked very deliberately here because it's actually one of the first cities in the world to have some sort of lighting ordinance. Way back in 1690, they decreed that every seventh house should hang a lantern out the front or a candle out the front to extend the daytime hours for people of the city. And what was very interesting then is that even during these periods, they would only do that during the dark phase of the moon. In other words, if it was a full moon, they didn't need to do it. Of course, that wasn't very fair on every seventh house. Eventually, they taxed the residents of New York. They introduced oil lanterns. But it wasn't until 1880 that New York got its first electric streetlights. About 5 years earlier in Russia were the first electric streetlights in the world. But 1880 in New York. And again, we can still go back in time and look at literature from this period, right up until the early 1900s, where we used street lighting only during the dark phase of the moon. In other words, lighting in our cities started as a supplement to the light sources that nature had given us. And in little over 100 years, we've gone from this idea of supplementing what nature has given us to obliterating it. And I think it's an interesting point. How do we get there? And this image really sums it up quite well. Gradually is the answer. The reality is that this loss of stars happened so slowly that no one noticed. Every new subdivision that went in with street lights, every billboard that had to be lit, every office building that leaves its lights on of an evening, All of these things slowly and surely contribute to this phenomenon called sky glow, this light pollution that sits above our cities and actually stops us from being able to see the stars. So this graph here, as you can see, 50s, mid-70s, 1997, 2025, we can ascertain one other thing from that is that you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to continue and light pollution is going to get worse before it gets better. I can sort of sum up a little bit what's going on from my hometown of Hobart, Tasmania, in the bottom of Australia. At the north of the picture here, we have an image of what the street lighting in Hobart used to look like. In 2013, they went through an LED rollout, which is what we see at the bottom of the screen. Admittedly, it's a lot brighter. It did improve the amenity of the city for people, and this was a good thing. In 2018, they upgraded another section of this street, and this is that image there. So you can see at the top of the image, the 2013 rollout, and at the bottom, the new 2018 LED rollout. And it's something that we're seeing happening on a global scale. It's what they call the Jevons paradox, where we have a super efficient technology, but rather than actually saving any energy, all we're seeing is that we're using more of the resource. And this was backed up in a global study in 2018 that looked at LED rollouts across the world at many, many cities. And they found that we'd saved very little energy. All we'd actually done was increase the number of light fittings and increase the brightness of our city. And so this is a big problem with LED. And this is the other big problem with LED, the fact that they actually start their life as blue chips. And we get the white light by phosphor coating them. But it doesn't matter how much phosphor we add, we're always left with this blue-rich light source. Now, this is a problem because much in the same way that the sky appears blue during the day as sunlight penetrates our atmosphere, it's the blue wavelengths, the blue spectrum, that actually scatter most efficiently through the atmosphere. And exactly the same thing happens as light leaves the planet. So whenever we replace a traditional light source that had very little blue in it with these new LEDs, inevitably we're increasing the blue content, which means that the scatter as this light pollution leaves the planet is much greater. So we increase our sky glow, and we're even accelerating that reduction of ability to see the stars. And so it's not surprising that light pollution is growing per annum globally at a rate of over 2.2% per annum, so year on year. But in developed nations, that can be as high as 6%. So we have a real problem with this LED light source. And it's actually far more serious than just the disappearance of our stars. And for more on that, I'll hand you over to Dr. Therese Jones.
So on my phone, I have an app that reduces the blue light at night. So at sunset, my screen goes from this very white screen that you can see on the left to a very red shifted screen that you see on the right. And I'm sure that many of you have phones that do similar things. But I wonder if any of you ever wondered about why you're doing that. Now, for some of you, it might be that you were told that it helps you sleep, and so you think you should do it. Some of you may actually know that it does help you sleep. Others may not know how to stop the app, and so they're there whether they like it or not. My kids would say that their mum makes them. They're not very happy about it, but that's what they have. Others of you may get a little bit more technical and say it's to do with your circulating melatonin levels, or maybe it has to do with your natural circadian rhythm. But I wonder whether any of you have actually thought about the true origin of why we're turning our phone into the red at night and reducing the blue. So the real ancestral reason why we change our phones to become red at night is that 4 billion years ago, blue light was an important trigger for life in the oceans to distinguish between day and night. So why blue light in particular? To answer that question, we need to go back to the oceans and look at how different colours of light move through the water. If you look at red light first, what you can see is it only goes down to about 50 metres. And that's fine as long as you're an organism floating around at 50 metres. But what if you're an organism that's down at 200? The colour of light then that is going to be the best indication of what's day, when there's lots of blue light around, or when it's night, when there's not very much light around, is blue. And that's the real reason why we actually change our phones from blue, indicating daylight, to blue reduced red, indicating nighttime on our phones. And our visual and non-visual spectral sensitivity is centered around this early evolutionary trigger. If we look, the V is our visual sensitivity. We can see quite well in the green, we can still see in the blue and red, but the C represents what we call our circadian spectrum. And here you can see this peak sensitivity around about 480 nanometers. This is due to 4 billion years of evolution. But of course, it's not the light per se that acts as a biological signal. That needs to get translated into a chemical or indeed a neurological reaction that we can actually understand biologically. One of the compounds we use is called melatonin. Many of you have probably heard of it. It's not going to surprise you to know that melatonin's peak sensitivity is around about 480 nanometers, or blue light. And in fact, its production in our bodies stops in the presence of light. So during the day, our concentrations of melatonin are very, very low, and they peak during the evening. They follow this wiggly pattern that you can see here. And this function as a biological timekeeper is probably the best known function of melatonin. And some of you may actually take melatonin tablets when you travel to try and get your body back into that natural biological rhythm when you go to a different time zone. Now, while we're not really sure how well that actually works, it is a really nice segue into the second function of melatonin, and that's as an antioxidant, a protector of the cells of life, rather like vitamin C and vitamin E. So melatonin for 4 billion years, because it is an ancient chemical found across much of life, has been as a driver of biological rhythm, but also as a protector of the cells of life. But it is sensitive to light, and it's not only sensitive to sunlight, it's also sensitive to electrical light or artificial light at night. And so in the presence of artificial light at night, this biological timekeeper and protector of the cells of life is no longer able to do its job. The presence of light at night has implications. The most obvious of that is that it can disrupt our ability to go to sleep. But it's not just our ability, it also disrupts the ability of many of the animals that live in our urban environment, like these black swans, or like these pigeons or magpies. Because of the antioxidant capacity of melatonin, the presence of light at night can also disrupt physiology. It can change aspects of growth, survival, and reproduction. Again, it does so in all of these animals shown. And finally, and perhaps more seriously, light at night has also been linked to increased risk of disease and cancer. In all of these animals at the top, you get reductions in immune function in the presence of light at night. Light at night has also been linked to increased disease and cancer risk in humans. And both the American Medical Association and the World Health Organization have issued warnings against its presence. The impact of light at night is extreme at the level of the individual, but increasing evidence suggests that light pollution may be implicated in some of the global declines we're seeing in biodiversity. So its reach is far beyond the light bulb that we all turn on, or indeed, hopefully, turn off. Thank you.
Thanks, Landon, and thanks, Teresa. I'm sure everyone has gone away with a few insights to think about. For me, though, the key thing is to remember that anything in overabundance is waste, and waste is pollution. You've made the change from using plastic bags, right, when you do your shopping, and that wasn't too painful, or at least I hope it wasn't. It's even easier to reduce light pollution and reduce your light footprint on the globe. As soon as you switch it off, it reduces it immediately. So how can you reduce your light footprint? Well, the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance put together these best practice lighting guides, and they can be put in your workplace or your home environment. There's 6 easy steps, which I admit are a little bit hard to read on this screen, but you can use them when you're considering light at night and how to use it. So let's put them into place. Okay, so this might be a building that you recognise. And using those guidelines, we'll go through the 6 steps. So the first one, am I starting with natural darkness and adding light only for specific purposes? This photo looks like it's taken in an urban area, so it's unlikely to be dark already. But that doesn't mean you couldn't consider putting curtains or shades on the windows. And this would significantly improve the nighttime environment and stop things like birds hitting windows. 2, am I using adaptive controls? I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. There are only a few people in this picture and they're sitting at their desk. Motion sensors could activate areas as people moved around the building, therefore reducing the amount of light that is actually spilling out into the night sky now. 3. Am I using the lowest intensity lighting for the task? And the answer is probably not. It is an office environment and people spend most of the time working there during the day, or at least I imagine that's the case. In that situation, lighting levels are probably set to daytime standards. However, you could trial warmer coloured globes and see what the reaction of your staff is, day and night. Am I lighting only the object or areas that need to be? Well, again, I don't think so. The few people I see are sat down and stationary, as I said before, so maybe just a desk lamp would be a better option. 4. Am I using warm coloured lighting? And actually that's 5, I beg your pardon. To be honest, there are definitely brighter offices out there, and really the warmer the light, the healthier the environment is for you and the external environment. Remember too that your device emits an enormous amount of blue light, so switch it off before you go home. And finally, 6, did Google use a lighting professional to come up with this lighting plan? And I don't know, but the chances are that if you did, you'd be amongst the very few. More often than not, lights are installed by electricians who just are installing the lights that were chosen on a budgetary consideration. But just as we consider the rest of our environment, light can change moods and the atmosphere of a building, as well as impact your global footprint as well. So it's worth considering. So to wrap up, the Australasian Dark Sky Alliance is a not-for-profit charity, and we're led by volunteers such as Landon and Teresa, who have extensive backgrounds in astronomy, ecology, industry and business. Our mission, as you've probably read on the bottom of the slides, is to educate public and policymakers to make better decisions when it comes to outdoor lighting. So we're shedding light on light. We'd love you to join us, and if you would like to, you can go to our website, Australasian Dark Sky Alliance, and become a member or donate so that we can do more of this work. But as I leave you, I'd like to ask you one last question. Next time you turn on a light outside at night, ask yourself, does the International Space Station really need to know where I am? Thank you.